Buongiorno Mondo, and welcome back to 15 with Fosca, the podcast, and to the second part of my chat with Devorah Block, strategy and engagement educator and advisor for the third sector. What is the future of our cities? What's changing and what needs to change? And how can we as citizens be agents of that urban transformation? Join Devorah and me as we continue to ask questions about the built environment, discuss her work with the Place Literacy Project, and the incredible dialogues happening right now at Florence's Salon of Urban Architecture around how our cities are designed, how we use that space, how we get to and move within our spaces, and the importance of putting humans back at the center of everything, very much like what happened during the Renaissance. Grazie mille. E buon ascolto.
Thank you.
But with all of that, also wondering how it is that I know so little about this when it is impacting all of those things.
Right.
And so, being the educator, I started thinking a lot about how ways in which we could work to sort of open up that understanding and knowledge to a broader public.
Yeah.
And so I'm currently working on a couple of main projects.
Okay.
One is, as keeps sort of being mentioned here, the Salon. So the Salon of Urban Architecture is a sort of inspiration of Karen Templin's. Karen is an architect, an urbanist, an amazing educator in her own right.
Absolutely. She's phenomenal.
Incredible.
Phenomenal.
And she has had this idea, I think, for about a decade.
Yeah.
And it's finally sort of coming to fruition, which is very exciting. So the Salon of Urban Architecture is a space in Florence, but it's also more of an idea. It's sort of an intellectual space that we're creating. Looking at urbanism, looking at Florence as the sort of natural classroom around urbanism that it is.
Yeah.
Taking advantage of our location here and bringing in an international conversation, though, around that.
Yeah.
So we have about once a month, we have an international speaker come through, and we have drinks and conversation. We are working on a couple of different projects to do education, so international education for a variety of audiences, for professionals, for just the very curious, really sort of unpicking what urbanism is and using the city and all of its richness to teach that. And having fun. We've got this amazing reading room. Karen has been collecting books on urbanism.
It's such a great space on every level.
Yeah.
And I just want to say quickly about, as you know, I've lived here now for 25 years.
Gosh.
And I have to say that the Salon is like nothing I've ever experienced in Florence. First of all, there's something so special about being able to be in a room, very intimate, which I love, but with so much power, and it's amazing because first of all you're surrounded by incredible architecture, which is already inspiring. You have an incredible space, incredible view, so already you feel like you're part of this dialogue with the city, right? And then all of a sudden you're in this intimate space with all these super interesting people. It's all very elevated, very intellectual, and it feels extremely homey. And I don't think I've ever found something like that. You go to big conferences where, you know, everyone's just like going on for hours. This is really a conversation because also the speakers you invite and the whole way it's set up and the fact that it's a smaller space, you know, is conducive to these amazing conversations. And every time I leave, I'm like, wow. Devorah and Karen are doing a great service to the city. Where can you go? Seriously, and I'm asking you, and have conversations with interesting people, have yummy drinks, food, beautiful views, learn things, engage with other people. You're building community, and you're doing a service to sort of a whole field.
It's lovely
amazing.
to hear you say that. I mean, because it's lovely. It's lovely and flattering, but it's also that you've put your finger on it. I mean, it's exactly what we're hoping to create.
No, you did create it. It's working. I mean, it's
wonderful.
working.
Yay! I think. I mean, it's also that opening up that conversation so that where I get very, very excited in general is sort of exploring the boundary that's between that shouldn't exist, I guess, in some ways, but that's between the professionals who are designing our cities and everybody else who may be like myself, who we're not as aware of how our cities have come about and how those decisions are made. And so having a space where we can create that, where it's not just architects. So we've had some amazingly also like, top-notch architects come through. But we also have people like me, or people like you,
Right.
and people like Noga, actually a lot of dropping names, but who are coming into the space with their own background and experience and expertise
Yeah.
and contributing to the conversations in other ways.
Right.
And so it's a very exciting thing. I should say as well, it's not just Karen and I. We're the two who are based here in Florence, but there's actually three of us.
Okay.
And the third woman is Rosamond Diamond.
Yeah.
She's another just wonderful and inspiring woman who knows every single person in the built environment in London, as far as I can tell. I mean, every single one. And she's been with us from the very beginning. Obviously from the UK. She's been able to come over for a couple of the salons so far. And she is also one of my partners in the other project that I'm working on.
Which
at
we're
the
going to
moment.
hear all about right now.
So, sure.
What is the project?
So, Roz and I are working on a project which is currently under the title of Place Literacy Project.
Nice.
We have been calling it Built Environment Literacy, and we've moved to Place recently. But so the website is still builtenvironmentliteracy.org.
Okay.
And it is very much a project around these same ideas. So around looking at the built environment through the lens of place. So really taking that as the way that we can understand the complexity of the built environment in a way that's also very easy. Place is something that it's easy for us to identify. Places can be big or small, but by focusing on a space like that, we can then sort of pick out all of the different threads, whether that's the way that the physical design of the space, the way that people use the space, the infrastructure that serves the space. How do you get there? How do you get away? If there's things like water or a bathroom.
Yeah.
And also have this sort of central node where we can talk about the different things that the same place can mean to different people.
That's where it gets very interesting.
That's exactly where what we're really excited about. So it's very early days for the project. We're still in the sort of research and development stage of figuring out exactly what we're doing. But it's definitely what is keeping me intellectually active at the moment and getting me excited day to day.
Okay.
So, yeah.
So since you're talking about space, I'm going to put you on the spot. No, because I think so you're working on that project in London, specifically with spaces in London or in spaces everywhere?
No, the idea, so at the moment, it really is, it's all
over?
theoretical at the moment, but it is all over.
Okay, so let's talk about spaces in Florence. Florence is a really difficult example, I think. We're currently in a new neighborhood of Florence, and I'm used to, I live in the historic downtown. I've always lived in the historic downtown. And when I come out here, which is, we're in a neighborhood, we're at Musicalmente, we're recording the podcast. I'm happy, we love it here, but I hate the neighborhood. And the reason why I hate the neighborhood is because I find it counterintuitive for me. So I find the spaces here, well, there are a lot of things we could talk about. There are a lot of architectural eyesores here where they could have done some brilliant things, but I defer to Karen on that. I'm not the expert. But I do, this notion of space in a place like Florence, where space is limited and where space is also so dictated and has, like, there are spaces that are off limits. There are spaces that are exclusive. There are spaces that have a very specific purpose. So tell me more about how you experience. This is a big one. I know. I don't even know what question I'm asking, but I'm very curious because there are a lot of obstacles in Florence. In other words, there are. It's not always easy to occupy space here because there is a shortage of space. So can you talk about that specifically in like what intrigues you, what spaces intrigue you here in Florence, or if you could even give an example of something that you think is like a good example of the kind of work you're doing?
I think that what's interesting to me about that is that Florence, I think because space is limited and also circumscribed, right? So that we do have, you were saying the historic center, and then there's the periphery, and then there's the, it has created, and again, I should defer to Karen on this because this is something that she actually knows extremely well.
Yeah.
And I can only speak to as a citizen of the city.
Right.
But it's a very contested space, but that has also led to enormous creativity.
Exactly.
And so there is the ability, and I don't have in mind actually an example, but in some ways because I feel like they're myriad, right? Examples of the ways in which reuse and adaptation has happened here.
Absolutely.
And so that, it's something that in other places in the world, they are, that's the direction that we're going in, right? We're very much at a point now when we're looking towards sustainability and where the future should be, in which architects are starting to say, we have to stop building.
That's right.
And, that's the first thing we have to do is we have to stop demolishing and we have to stop building.
Right.
It has to be about adaptation and reuse. And if that's the case, in a lot of places, that's unheard of. I mean, in America, for example, you just knock it down and build something new in its place.
Even with just a normal house.
Even with a normal, exactly, with anything.
It's so much a part of the culture here. It's just...
A friend of mine in Melbourne, they just decided they were going to expand, and they were like, you know what, it's easier if we just like knock it all down and rebuild on our lot of land.
Which is not sustainable.
It's not.
All it's, yeah.
And here, you have to come up with solutions. And so there are, and there's lots of, it means you move here. Anybody who has even been here on holiday and certainly has moved here, I mean, you see some weird spaces.
Right.
Some weird offices, some weird, apartments, some weird bathrooms.
Let's just get it out there.
Let's call it creativity.
Yeah, let's call it creative. But yeah.
But it's also part of what's so fascinating, and I think it's also this really amazing, and I've actually heard Karen speak about this, but of course can't think of any, examples right now, but the ways in which the sort of the palazzi of the historic center are these incredible examples of adaptation and reuse and the ways that they have been reinterpreted over time.
Absolutely.
Palazzo Strozzi, it used to be a private home.
Right.
And now it's a contemporary art
incredible
center.
Cultural space that's been repurposed
Repurposed.
in the to the service of the citizens.
To the service of the citizens,
Right.
and with respect still to the original architecture. I mean, it is doable.
Yeah.
It's very doable. So yeah, I mean, I think that's...
Palazzo Strozzi is a really good example.
Palazzo Strozzi is an interesting example.
Manifattura Tabacchi?
Yes,
Let's talk about it a second, because it's a space that I find to be sort of a paradigm for what can be done.
Yeah.
So taking an industrial space and making it residential, and also it's full of like shops and amazing
Completely
initiatives. It's
multi-use,
a whole cultural center. And so I want to talk a little, since it is such an interesting moment in time, and you're thinking about space, what do people need now? Like when you're talking about space and how we occupy the spaces that we move through, right? What kind of questions are you asking?
I mean, I'll be honest, the project that I'm involved in is more about encouraging people to ask questions as opposed to saying what the questions are. And to engage in that. And I think it's about giving people more agency. So sort of helping people to understand that there are questions to be asked. But what I think a lot of people are asking are questions that are around, I think that we're seeing a real shift towards the human again, which is interesting as I'm saying this, like in Florence, that idea of, the Renaissance was really about putting the human at the center of everything.
That's right.
And I think that that's what we are looking as a global society. I think that in different shades and in different ways and with different contexts and nuances, that what a lot of people are seeking out, though, is putting a real value on the human again, with a difference, I guess, that it's the human contextualized within our sort of larger living ecosystem, not person first sort of a thing, but that we need to somehow live in balance with all of the forms of life that are around us. And that's a real challenge and a real shift. And I think it's one that it's also, when we started today, we were talking about the fact that neither you nor I are digital natives, and we've had to get used to adapt exactly to technology, and that we're both
really
we're
good.
not bad at it.
No, not at all.
All things considered. But there, we talk about this so much now, but there are huge gaps now between generations and experiences, and I think that I'm very conscious of the fact that even when I speak to my colleagues who are in their early 30s,
huge difference.
There's a huge difference.
chasm.
And then they talk to me about how their students who are in their early 20s, there's a chasm between.
That's right.
So I think the ways that people, it makes it even more difficult for me to sort of answer or respond to the question, because I'm like.
But see, I think that's the key to it. We're at this really strange moment in time where, for example, even if you just look at the average workplace, which is another one of those spaces that we need to be thinking about a lot right now, perhaps for the first time in history, you've got boomers. They're still there. I don't think silent generation, which is my parents' generation, most have retired, but probably not all. But we have boomers. We have Generation X, which is me, millennials, and now Generation Z, and they're all working together in these spaces, and we're all inhabiting these spaces together. It's not very straightforward, and because there are some major generational differences that we need to also be. We need to sort of be working to really narrow those differences, but also to increase the communication, to increase human contact, to increase these intergenerational conversations. And because if not, it's just like we're going nowhere. But beyond that, I was just thinking about something really interesting. I don't know if you read about this, but there's evidently this like ad going around that's gone viral. I think it's for a pub or something, and basically it's this elderly man who like is walking his dog. He casually meets this couple on the street, and they end up, it's sort of like an anti-solitude Christmas or holiday spot. But what it's captured, and why I'm interested in talking to you about it, is what it's captured is solitude. Okay, the fact that there is this solitude. We have to talk about it, okay, for what it's worth. And it might be a consequence of the pandemic. It might be a consequence of just the fact that our world is kind of, I keep saying it, but like the world is not an easy place right now. So this spot basically says like, okay, so we randomly meet these people, we talk in this space on the street, we go to another space, the pub, right? Sort of the sacred temple of, British social life, if you will, public life. And so I find it interesting that this ad has gone so viral because it seems so normal to me, right? So how how are people who are designing things, and how are people like you who are thinking about these things and asking these questions, how can we bring human beings closer together? And how can we put humans back at the center? Because there's also the elephant in the room that we haven't talked about, which is AI, right? And that's also complicating things. And then, of course, the fact that our Mother Nature is extremely unhappy with us. And so I think, exploring these spaces has all of these incredible other implications going on. So as we sort of come to the end of our conversation, how are you moving forward with something like this, with all these incredible moving pieces, but also just the sheer velocity of our world right now?
I mean, I think that as you were speaking about it, one of the thoughts that came to mind was the fact that, yes, it's the pandemic, yes, it's life now, but it is also the way that we've designed our cities and our public spaces. But it's not just the design of them, it's also all of the decisions that are being made around their use, right? So there's the design and then there's the use. The ways in which we aren't taking care of that phase of a project's life. Yeah. And then the decisions that are being made that disallow us to create social moments and social uses. Yeah. And there's an enormous amount of work and creativity that is going into this right now around the ways in which we can bring our high streets into a social space again, so that they aren't commercial high streets, yeah, but that they are social spaces.
Exactly.
And that's the currency, quote unquote, that we need to be concerned about.
Okay.
And exactly, the pub is anybody who's sort of familiar with the conversation in the UK is this sort of, it's iconic, not just the pub in and of itself, but also of this conversation, right? The pubs that are being shut down, the pubs right. that aren't able to survive, right. the pubs that are, and it is, it is a focal point. Yeah. But so is the street. So is walking down the street and being able to have that moment of conversation. Creating streets that permit that.
That's right.
Having modes of transportation that permit that, lifestyles that permit that, so that we're not driving in our cars all the time as individuals, but we are walking down the street. I mean, that in and of itself is one of those decisions.
And those are life-changing because
they can be huge.
People are angry in their cars, You
Absolutely.
see a lot of people, one person in their car, all upset about something, right?
Because
and that's
don't have that human
right,
contact.
Right, and it's terrible.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I just think that, for example, here in Italy, where you still have that social aspect, you have the piazza, you have the cafe, the bar, you have the passeggiata, right? So Italy, I think already has this notion of, the piazza is where everything plays out. Yeah. It's where, especially in small town life, but you still see it in Florence. So I think in a way the Italians are always quite, they're quite good at their spaces. In other words, they're quite good at creating spaces, but also I think Italians have had to be innovative because of the lack of space. Yeah. So I think I'm thinking as we're talking and as we're coming really to the end of the conversation, because I don't want to keep you here all day, but I think about Milan a lot because I think in Milan, in certain neighborhoods where they have, for example, they have all the sustainable buildings, but they've created these. For example, there's one, and when we put the podcast description, and I'll more accurately cite where it is. But there's this space where you're right by the building that's covered with the bosco verticale, yeah. right? And it's this amazing public space. So there's a garden, like a community garden. There's all these places to sit, but comfortably places, a lot of green. But there's also centri commerciali. Right. So what you have is if you live in that neighborhood, all you need to do is go downstairs.
Right.
You have everything you need, but you also have access to people, other humans, a
Yeah.
social circle, things like a community garden, an urban garden, things like that. So as we're coming to the end of the conversation, I want to know sort of what you see as the future of a city, for example, like Florence. Like, what direction do you think it's going in a good direction?
Thank goodness the podcast does not have video.
Oh, the expression you just made was priceless. Just as an FYI to all the people out there listening, Florence is so under construction right now that honestly, like half of the time, I have no idea like where I'm supposed to go because a street is closed. There's a lot of construction, a lot of refurbishing.
Yeah. And a
Florence
lot
is
of
challenging.
tourism.
Yeah.
And, I think that Florence is at risk of becoming one of these cities that is suffocated by, and I think that I don't think that I don't have answers, for what needs to happen in Florence or any other city, but I do think that where the answers lie are in the residents of a neighborhood. And I think that there is just never going to be that where we make mistakes is when we think that there is a way to do it. Where we say, I saw this amazing neighborhood in Milan, let's make one here.
Right.
And that won't work.
No.
Because for it to work, it has to be unbelievably contextualized. And the only way that can happen, and this is where I think that we have a lot of work to do, all of us, is by allowing design to happen from the bottom up and empowering people and giving people the agency and the understanding and the knowledge so that they are able to participate knowledgeably in the conversations about what their neighborhood should look like. And I think that there's just a lot of work to do to get there. And it's, in my opinion, though, some of the most important work that we can be doing, because what that does is it democratizes the conversation and it puts, the power with the people, which sounds sort of, maybe a little hokey or whatever, but that's what needs to happen. And that is the only way, in my opinion, that we are going to be able to get to a place where we are actually creating and living in sustainable cities that are just, that are equitable, that are doing all of the things that we need to have happen. It has to come with the support from policy and from the top, but we are the people that need to make it happen, and we need to be given the agency to do that.
And that's the work you're doing.
And that's the work that I hope to be doing.
And you're doing it. And I think it's a perfect way for us to end because I couldn't agree more. And I think the work you're doing is so important to have these conversations and to be able to sort of take back our cities and our living spaces.
Absolutely.
So this has been such a good conversation. We need to have another. We will. We'll have another one with Karen, and we'll talk more about the salon. But also, I would love to just have you back just to chat because
anytime. This is wonderful.
It was so great, and so thanks to you, Devorah, and thanks to everyone for tuning in. And alla prossima volta. Grazie mille.